underway. Welcome to the 20th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. This is our fourth and last meeting as part of the plastic study. For the benefit of witnesses, the way we proceed is we have 5-minute opening statements, and then we go to rounds of questioning. You, of course, may answer in either official language, and when not speaking, please put yourselves on mute. That really covers pretty much all of the procedural aspects.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
You said this was the final one. We do.
No, I said second to last.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's one more, and which will be with the departmental officials. Now, there's all kinds of things going on in the House, of course. There's a couple of votes planned. So I propose the following, and I hope you'll agree. What we could do is when the bells start, I'm monitoring this. I know the clerk is probably monitoring it. We could continue with our meeting until there's 5 minutes left before the voting starts. And then we could basically put ourselves on mute, turn off our cameras, whatever, vote. And then when the 10-minute voting period is over, we come back to the meeting. So it would be a 15-minute interruption maximum. Twice, probably we'll be interrupted twice, and we'll be able to, end our meeting at a reasonable hour. Does anyone object to this approach? No? Okay, great. Okay, so we have with us today from the Canadian Beverage Association, Mr. Jim Goetz, President from Environmental Defence Canada. We have Karen Wierzig, Program Manager, Plastics. We will have the Honourable Sonia Savage, Minister of Energy for the Province of Alberta, joining us shortly. From Oceana Canada, we have Joshua Lofgren, Executive Director, and Ashley Wallace, Plastics Campaigner. And from the Regional Municipality of Peel, we have Mr. Norman Lee, Director of Waste Management. So we shall begin with a 5-minute opening with Mr. Goetz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just double checking. You can hear me? Everything was working earlier? Good stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We really appreciate the opportunity to appear here today before the committee. My name is Jim Goetz. I'm president of the Canadian Beverage Association, an organization representing the majority of non-alcoholic beverage companies in Canada. I'm going to say CBA as our short form. CBA members directly employ over 20,000 Canadians in more than 200 facilities nationwide in every region of the country. The refreshment industry supports jobs directly and indirectly in retail, food service, vending, convenience, and restaurant channels. The CBA and our members share the Government of Canada's goal to reduce plastic waste, increase recycling, and transition to a more robust circular economy. Our beverage containers are made to be remade. The plastic materials used are designed to be recycled and repurposed. Beverage containers are collected at high rates, recycled at high rates, and are valuable within the collection stream and circular economy value chain. They are not intended to be disposed of as waste. Not only is PET, the plastic that beverage bottles are made out of, recyclable, but can be easily recycled to achieve food grade quality through mechanical or advanced recycling and be made back into a bottle or other food contact packaging. The government's discussion paper defines single use as, quote, designed to be thrown away after being used only once. Distinguishing between true single-use plastic and PET beverage bottles and HDPE caps is critical to facilitating informative and accurate future discussions. Beverage containers are collected, recycled, and processed here in Canada, supporting jobs within the circular domestic economy from coast to coast. including large recycling facilities in Quebec, British Columbia, Ontario, and Alberta. The CBA and our members play a leadership role to manage and strengthen regional, mostly at the provincial level, recycling programs. These programs currently achieve beverage container recycling rates averaging 75%. Some jurisdictions reach 85%, a robust recovery rate compared to other plastics overall. CBA is actively engaged in extended producer responsibility recycling programs, either in place for decades or in development, which will work to increase harmonization and efficiency and invest over $300 million in beverage container recycling programs nationwide. We believe EPR is the appropriate management tool for beverage container packaging. This approach is instrumental to achieving current and future material collection targets, which we support and advocate in favor of reaching higher targets. As you consider a new plastics framework, such as the recently announced list of banned materials from ECCC and recycled content standards, we ask that you study and account for the complexity of the detailed planning and overall material engineering and replacement projects that industry will have to carry out, including supplier capacity, lead time, technical support capabilities, depending on how many industry lines need to be changed, and the cost of converting and retooling and downtime as well. Backup contingency planning and establishing an appropriate and workable phase out period. We believe that recycled content standards legislation should allow flexibility on how our members achieve an overall recycling content percentage required to meet set targets. While Canada has high recovery rates on beverage containers relative to other materials, we must be mindful that the amount of recycled material that will be available domestically to meet recycled content targets. We want to get to those targets, but there has to be the material available to do it, particularly if it's set in legislation. In summary, we are proud that beverage containers have the highest recovery and recycling rate for plastic packaging in Canada. Our members have made commitments to increase the recycled content of their PET plastic bottles in the coming years and will continue our contribution to a circular economy. We will carry on building and supporting recycling programs in every jurisdiction across the country to keep beverage containers and caps out of the environment and retain their value by increasing rates of recovery and recycling across Canada.
Thank you.
I would thank the committee and especially the committee staff. Just want to reiterate, I had technical problems as well, and the staff were excellent in helping out, getting me connected. So thank you for the committee, and I look forward to any questions.
Yes, we're very fortunate to have the great support of the House of Commons staff at all levels. We'll go now to Environmental Defence Canada with Karen Werzig. Ms. Werzig, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the committee for the invitation. Environmental Defence is a Canadian environmental charity. We work on a number of federal and provincial environmental issues, including protecting Canada's fresh water, fighting climate change, urging sustainable land use planning, eliminating toxics, and ending plastic pollution. We'd like to cover 4 points in our testimony today. 1, that SEPA is an appropriate tool for dealing with plastic pollution in Canada. 2, that recycling alone is not any kind of solution to the growing tide of plastic pollution. 3, that the government must be more proactive to support reuse systems that replace single-use materials and especially plastics. And 4, that the government must end subsidies to the petrochemical industry and focus on workers and communities in the transition towards a low-carbon economy. On SEPA, I hope that committee members have had an opportunity to read the written brief we submitted a few weeks ago, where we recommend specific federal action to stop plastic pollution. Of those recommendations, I'd like to highlight that we support the listing of plastic manufactured items to Schedule 1 of SEPA, which is the most effective way to address upstream and downstream plastic pollution in Canada. Plastics are toxic to the environment, and it is wholly appropriate to regulate them under Canada's Environmental Protection Act. We also support banning single-use plastic items, including the 6 proposed in the government's discussion paper of last autumn. And we support establishing a recycled content requirement for new plastic products. We're calling for a comprehensive set of tools to manage plastic pollution that require the government to use its regulatory authority. Industry commitments to address plastic pollution are most welcome, but voluntary efforts and partnerships alone will not solve this crisis. Environmental defense supporters have sent more than 40,000 messages to the government in support of action on plastics pollution. I can tell you from my own interaction with supporters that there is a high level of frustration about the amount of plastic we have to deal with as consumers, of concern about the damage this plastic is causing in the environment, and of anxiety about the impacts on our health. Polling from earlier this year confirms that there is a very high degree of consensus among Canadians across the political spectrum that the federal government must act to protect our environment from plastic pollution. The public is expecting the federal government to do something about the plastics crisis. On recycling, it's an important aspect of a circular economy, but frankly has limited use for plastics under current market conditions. We reject the contention stated repeatedly during these hearings by representatives of the plastics industry that poor waste management is to blame for plastic pollution and that the solution is better behavior by consumers and more innovative recycling, including so-called advanced thermal and chemical processes subsidized by governments. Recycling, and particularly so-called advanced recycling, will not save us from plastic pollution, and pretending it will is a mistake we urge the government not to make. On reuse, we were surprised to note that no organizations currently involved in reuse systems to replace single-use plastic materials have appeared during this study. We urge Environment and Climate Change Canada to host a roundtable for reuse companies and organizations to learn more about what infrastructure is needed to support reuse across the country. We've talked to a number of reuse organizations, and they tell us their service is popular and important to both the environment and the economy, but supports are needed to scale it up in communities across the country. We note that it takes relatively little investment to create good local jobs through reuse systems, jobs involved in logistics, sanitation, and technology that could support communities and workers suffering right now due to COVID-related job losses. One of these organizations, Dream Zero, reports that the infrastructure for manufacturing and effectively recycling durable plastic containers in Canada is sorely lacking. Plastics manufacturers here are focused on the production of linear, single-use products, the vast majority of which end up in landfills, incinerators, or directly into the environment at end of life. Despite seeking local manufacturers, Dream Zero has been forced to get supply from China and Europe of durable takeout containers that can be reused hundreds of times. Dream Zero is currently storing their containers at end of life in order to find a local recycler able to reliably turn them back into new food-safe containers. Reuse systems in manufacturing is the kind of green technology that the federal government must support as we move to a low carbon economy. Finally, we're asking the government to end subsidies to the petrochemical industry. Plastics are a segment of the oil and gas industry, and Canada has committed to ending fossil fuel subsidies. It makes no sense to support the petrochemical and plastic industries with grants and tax breaks that ultimately serve to increase production of plastics when we're trying to stem the flow of plastic products into the environment. Instead of supporting environmentally problematic petrochemical projects, we urge the government to adopt a just transition plan for chemical workers and plastics manufacturers that shifts the focus of manufacturing to durable products, develops widespread reuse systems, and invests in mechanical recycling able to turn durable materials back into reusable products of a similar value. This kind of plan will avoid stranding workers and infrastructure in the kind of economy we're trying to get away from. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wurzig. I don't know if the Honourable Sonia Savage is on the line or if we're still working on connecting her.
I just checked. We're still working on connecting her.
Okay. We'll move on then to Mr. Lofgren for 5 minutes.
Ashley Wallace will be speaking on.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, Ms. Wallace, I'm sorry about that.
No problem. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for inviting me today to speak about this important issue. My name is Ashley Wallace, and I am the plastics campaigner at Oceana Canada, and I am joined today by Oceana Canada's Executive Director, Josh Loughran. Oceana Canada is an independent charity and part of the largest international advocacy group dedicated solely to ocean conservation. We believe that Canada has an obligation to manage our natural resources responsibly and help ensure a sustainable source of protein for the world. We work with Canadians coast to coast to coast to return Canada's formerly vibrant oceans to health and abundance. As nearly every witness has said over the last few weeks, the world is without doubt facing a plastic pollution crisis. Scientists from around the world are raising alarm bells with study after study describing the ubiquity of plastic pollution and the impacts plastic production, use, and disposal have on both environmental and human health. As one of the wealthiest and most economically productive countries in the world, we have a responsibility to end Canada's contribution to the plastic pollution disaster. Last year, 2 groundbreaking studies estimated the effectiveness of various interventions and found that predicted growth in plastic waste far exceeds global efforts to mitigate plastic pollution. One of the studies found that implementing all feasible interventions would still lead to 17 million metric tons of plastic waste ending up in the global environment every year by the year 2040. The study also found that recycling alone would only reduce plastic pollution by 45% when compared to a business as usual scenario. Let me reframe that for a second. Even in the best recycling scenario, by 2040, 45 million metric tons of plastic would be flowing into the global environment every year. That is 7 million more metric tons than today. These findings highlight the urgent need to regulate plastic across its life cycle, and that despite what the committee has heard from industry, we cannot recycle our way out of this crisis. Canada needs to reduce plastic production and use, including banning non-essential plastic products that are commonly found polluting our rivers, oceans, parks, and wild areas. To mitigate the impact of plastic on the environment and human health, and to support Canada's transition to a non-toxic, low-carbon circular economy, we recommend the following. First, expand and finalize the federal ban on harmful single-use plastics. More than 32 countries have already banned or are in the process of banning single-use plastics, including the European Union, Chile, Peru, and Kenya. Canada's proposed ban is a good step, but overall falls short of what is needed. The items the government has proposed to ban are low-hanging fruit, with many cities and businesses across Canada already banning or voluntarily replacing them with non-plastic or non-single-use alternatives. Oceana Canada polled Canadians in December of last year and found that 2/3 want the ban expanded to include other problematic single-use plastics, like single-use coffee cups and lids, and all forms of polystyrene. The government has science and public opinion on its side and should finalize and implement the ban no later than December of this year. Second, Canada must reject false solutions to the plastic pollution crisis. Incineration, energy from waste, waste to fuel, downcycling, and so-called advanced or chemical recycling are just waste disposal in disguise. These false solutions perpetuate a toxic, carbon-intensive linear economy. For example, chemical recycling technologies face similar challenges to traditional mechanical recycling, including requiring a relatively pure, homogeneous flow of plastic to be economically viable. They are also immature and energy intensive and often do not displace virgin plastic, making them incompatible with a circular economy. Lastly, instead of subsidizing the fossil fuel and petrochemical sectors, Canada needs to support the shift to reusable products and packaging. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation estimates that replacing 20% of single-use plastics globally with reusables would generate $10 billion in economic activity. Therefore, regulations that limit the use of single-use plastics, such as the ban, should be paired with incentives and investments that encourage and support the development of robust reuse systems. In closing, this past December, scientists found microplastics in human umbilical cords and placentas, meaning that unborn babies are exposed to plastic pollution in utero and that plastic can cross the placental barrier. We are exposed to plastic before we are born. Plastic pollution isn't just all around us, it is also inside us. I urge the committee to recommend that the government institute strong federal regulations under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act to end the plastic disaster.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wallace. We'll go to Mr. Lee from the Regional Municipality of Peel for 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to appear before this committee. My name is Norman Lee, and I'm the Director of Waste Management at the Regional Municipality of Peel. The region of Peel is home to over 1.5 million people who generate over 500,000 tons of residential waste each year. We currently divert half of it, including 100,000 tons through our Blue Box program and another 100,000 tons through our green bin and yard waste programs. We have a target of 75% diversion by 2034 and are making significant investments to reach it. In Ontario, municipalities manage about 1/3 of all waste generated, including virtually all residential waste. We also collect much of the litter. I expect other provinces are similar. The municipal perspective is therefore important, and I thank you for taking the time to hear it. One of the most significant waste management challenges faced by municipalities today is the recycling of plastic packaging, which is becoming lighter and more complex, making it more difficult and more expensive to manage. The lack of mandatory recycled content requirements results in weak demand for some recovered plastics, such as the plastic film used in grocery bags. Messages from brand owners and retailers often conflict with municipal messaging about what can be recycled or composted. This results in materials put in the wrong bin, which increases costs and decreases diversion. The Region of Peel supports the use of an evidence-based approach to assess problematic single-use plastics. The region supports the establishment of minimum recycled contents. We support the expansion of EPR programs across Canada, and we support the proposed ban on harmful single-use plastics, including the 6 items identified for the initial ban. These single-use plastics are often undetected and increasingly difficult to separate in municipal facilities. They contaminate our recycling and our compost, and are a major contributor to litter in our streets, parks, and waterways. While municipalities support the use of environmentally friendly alternatives, we are concerned with the promotion of compostable plastic-like materials until our systems can be changed to manage them. These materials pose a challenge at our composting facilities because our facilities are not designed to compost them, nor are they designed to effectively separate them out as contaminants. To retrofit our facilities right now would be prohibitively expensive. The Region of Peel operates its own composting system. We've worked with a number of producers to test the compostability of their products and packages, and at the end of a standard 9-week composting cycle, none of the materials that we tested were fully decomposed and would contaminate the finished compost, reducing its value, or worse, making it unsellable. The Region of Peel is investing $100 million to develop an anaerobic digestion facility for its green bin material. This facility will be better at removing contaminants, but our investigations show that most compostable products and packaging would be removed early in the process and sent to landfill. The use of compostable plastics and plastic-like materials as an alternative to single-use plastics will be problematic until the following measures are put in place. National certification standards that ensure materials marketed as compostable can be composted in practice and at scale. National labeling and advertising standards to reduce confusion amongst residents. Producer responsibility programs.
You cut out there, Mr. Lee.
Oh, sorry. At which point?
It's cut out. I don't know, Madam Clerk, if what happens in that situation. I don't know, if Mr. Lee can hear me. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. Oh, there you go.
I can hear both of you.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, it's my issue then. I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, well, carry on.
Okay, so I'll go back to, we think the following measures should be put in place before compostable plastics and plastic-like materials are introduced and supported. National certification standards that ensure materials marketed as compostable can be composted in practice and at scale. National labeling and advertising standards to reduce consumer and resident confusion. Producer responsibility programs for compostable products and packaging, preferably in accordance with national standards or guidelines. These should be accompanied by federal programs to support investment in processing infrastructure for compostable products and packaging, and mandatory recycled content requirements that are sufficiently high and enforceable.
Okay. Good.
Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Okay, I don't know if the Honorable Sonia Savage is on the line.
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll do like we did last session. If she comes on, we'll interrupt the questioning and provide her with 5 minutes to make a statement. Okay, so we'll go to the first round with Mr. Generou for 6 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wonder if you'd be open to doing something a bit unusual and swapping our round with Liberals' next round, only perhaps giving Minister Savage an extra time. I was hoping to focus my questions on Minister Savage's testimony.
So what you're saying is we'd have Mr. Longfield go, and then Mr. Saini, and then the second round it would be Mr. Redekop and yourself.
I had questions for her. I had questions for her as well.
Okay.
So
let me see here if we can figure this out quickly. Why don't we start with Madame?
I can take the round if that makes it easier.
That does, Mr. Albus. Thank you. So
okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think, first of all, I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here today and presenting your different viewpoints. I'm sure this is going to be a good discussion. I'm going to start with Mr. Lee. So, Mr. Lee, you've raised a few different points in your presentation. Specifically, we've heard before at this committee, I believe it was in a study of C204, that in Ontario there are multiple different standards that are followed, and it creates a lot of consumer confusion. Can you state if that's the case?
There are a lot of different approaches, especially in the Blue Box program, where individual municipalities are responsible for the design of the program and deciding what goes in the Blue Box. And that confuses residents when they travel from one municipality to the next. The same is true with our green bin programs. We each decide what goes in our green bin program, and we make those decisions based on a number of factors, including the design of our processing equipment and whether or not we can actually process certain materials. One example that comes up over and over is coffee cups, used coffee cups. Some municipalities allow them in the Blue Box, some municipalities allow them in the green bin, and some municipalities allow them in neither, depending on the types of equipment that they use. So that does cause confusion. But there's also confusion between the messages that municipalities give to residents and the messages that retailers give, sometimes right on the package, about the recyclability or compostability of packages.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's contamination issues and whatnot, but that may be on what we're discussing today. One of the things that we've heard as well is that, largely the producers, as well as those that package, as well as those that want to reuse these materials, such as the coffee cup container lid, has said that there's value to that. And what if there's not a standard practice, let's say within a geographical area, such as Peel, Durham, and other areas around the GTA, that they are unable to get enough scale to actually create a market. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. That if a product is recyclable but is not accepted in enough places, they won't have the scale to attract the investment in the downstream processing, and that's one of the reasons that Peel supports producer responsibility, where producers would then be in control of the design of the blue box across, whether it's the province of Ontario or any other province, and hopefully consistent across the entire country, so that if they decide to put something like a coffee cup lid in the blue box, they can do it everywhere and generate the scale that's needed to attract the investment and make it viable.
So I'm from British Columbia, and as you know, there is one single EPR regime for British Columbia, and the rates of recycling are massively different, and they create different opportunities for private sector to work with municipalities that are mainly in charge of collections. Do you think that we should be, that the federal government, even if it's not in its jurisdiction to force municipalities to, because obviously they're creatures of the province, do you believe, though, that the federal government should be taking this to the table, for example, the national table for environmental ministers, and working with them?
Sorry, Mr. Lee, I'm told that your mic is a little too close to your mouth. If you could raise it a bit, it would help the interpreters. Thank you.
Is that better up there?
I think, personally, I think so, but we'll see.
Okay. I think it would be helpful through the Canadian Council of Ministers of Environment to develop EPR guidelines that could be put in place across Canada to help guide EPR programs, so that there is, consistency across the country and it doesn't change dramatically from province to province.
Now, that obviously is different than what this federal government is calling for, which is banning, which is a very simple thing to say. It's a simple idea. But do you think that actually by working on getting standard national regulation that allows for a better pickup of these materials, do you think that that's really going to help municipalities like your own or your county to be able to deal and to see recycling go up?
I think if there is harmonized EPR programs across each province or across the country with sufficiently high targets set for them, that will certainly help with the capture of these materials. But I don't think it would be the full solution, because there are materials such as, just for example, items in the initial ban, such as coffee straws, which tend to contaminate everything in the blue box, right? They're very difficult to separate out, and they tend to end up in the litter as well. Plastic grocery bags, which are accepted in many recycling programs, including the one in Peel, still end up in the environment. So there are some materials where we at the region believe a ban is still appropriate if the material is not being recycled effectively.
All right, Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
We're out of time. Barely out of time. You're welcome. Now I know Mr. Longfield would rather switch. So and even though we're past,
no, I've got some municipal questions as well.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was wanting to tie some of the federal, municipal, and provincial themes together, but I think I can work with what we have. Mr. Lee, just to continue with you, you being a graduate of the University of Guelph, it's always good to see an alumnus on the panel.
Thank you. I am, yes.
Yeah, it's great. And Guelph also does a lot of work with Peel. I know we've had the partners in Project Green from Pearson Airport come out to our municipality to show how they've created a circular economy within the businesses in Peel. And maybe a quick comment on that view of waste being a resource, and also I'll tag on a little bit to that as well, that you talked about an increased facility that you're looking at putting in to be able to attract composting from other communities. Guelph has something similar where we increased our composting facility, and we've also increased our recovery systems, and now have contracts with Waterloo where we take their waste as a resource for us to use. So there's some economic opportunities is what I'm saying, not only between businesses, but also between municipalities.
Thank you for the question, and to Mr. Chair. I'll try to, I think I've got them all down here, and if I missed any, the member can ask again. As far as the resources, humans consume a lot of resources, and if we don't get those from our waste streams, we have to go back out to the forest and the mines and such to get them. So I believe strongly in capturing as many resources out of our waste stream as possible and keeping them in use to reduce the need for raw natural resources. We do that, of course, with the recycling program, and the more of that material that we can capture and keep out of landfills in the environment, the less extraction is needed. And Peel is building an anaerobic digestion facility that would have enough capacity in it to serve our needs, plus to also allow for some other municipal green bin material to be processed there. We just completed a upgrades to our Blue Box recycling facility that we spent over $24 million on to increase its capacity and improve its performance. And again, we'll be able to bring materials in, which helps efficiencies and keeps costs down.
So it really points to the need for standards, as you've already given us testimony, and I appreciate that. And now I'm feeling like we're competing in the market, and that's always a good thing as well. I would like to shift over to the Canadian Beverage Association. In your testimony, we're talking about recovery rates. One of the partners in Project Green in Peel is Coca-Cola. Of course, they're looking at reducing their costs on waste, but also using waste as a resource for inputs for other businesses. What's the relationship between the manufacturers and the association and the users in terms of who bears the cost when we look at putting in an EPR program? For Mr. Gates.
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, absolutely. Coca-Cola is one of our members out in Peel and Mississauga, obviously. We have several manufacturing facilities there that are members of our association, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Refreshco as well, which employ hundreds of folks in that region. The beverage sector, actually, it's a unique situation where we represent a fairly, when you look at overall plastic production that either goes out in waste or is recycled, the beverage sector actually represents a very, very small percentage of that. Yet, over time, in various provinces, there has been a focus on our containers, which we have accepted, and because our member companies want to make sure that our products are collected, are not seen out on the street, and are recycled at a high rate. I think when it comes, again, there are problematic plastics, which I think Norm commented on, that are harder to recycle. But beverage containers, although there seems to be a bit of a focus on them, are not those products. PET plastic, which is what our containers are made out of, and the lids as well, are recycled. There's a market for them, and they're bought and sold as a commodity.
Similar. We've got limited time, and we've got that. And thank you for your testimony. It was the cost piece I was searching for, but I have to flip over because I only have 30 seconds for the environmental defense. In your report, 6 ways Canada can progress to zero plastic waste by 2025. Solution 5 is using economic instruments, such as I was just mentioning, and who bears the cost for those. Could you expand on that just a little bit in the few seconds we have left?
So obviously, governments can help support the the transition to the kinds of circular economy infrastructure that's going to be needed. But we believe producers should be responsible. We agree with the Region of Peel's assessment. Producers should be responsible primarily for making this happen. They produce the materials. They choose the materials. They have the direct relationship with their customers, and they should bear the responsibility and the full cost of the full life cycle of the products.
Parfait.
Okay,
Alors,
thank you.
Je viens d'apprendre que...
Fine. I've just learned that it's not very likely that Ms. Savage will be able to join us owing to continuing technical issues. However, it will be possible to submit a written brief. So the bells have started to ring, but we have 20 minutes before the vote, so we'll continue with Ms. Posey. Yes, well, listen, I would have questions to ask of all our guests, but I know that I won't have time. I'm going to start with Ms. Wallace of Oceana Canada. You stated, for example, that we have to reduce our production and consumption, ultimately, of plastic, and you're saying that the ban that's being considered in the study is essential and that it's not sufficient. And you even mentioned what needs to be added, and you emphasized the urgency of acting at the federal level to regulate, and you also reviewed what was in other countries, and that's what I'm getting at. I share your position about a reduction of our use and that petrochemical subsidies should be redirected elsewhere. So what state has made the most progress, and over what time period was that achieved, and to what degree can Canada draw inspiration from that?
Yeah, so I think, thank you for the question through the chair. There are obviously, as I stated, other countries that have already made progress on this issue. There are only a couple that already have their laws in place. The EU, for example, proposed their law in 2018, and it will be coming into force this summer. So this summer, we'll start to see the real impacts of the European Union's proposed ban. They did do some really comprehensive analysis, though. It was done for them by Eunomia, and I would be happy to share that report with the committee afterwards for your review. But they did some complicated analysis, and they found exactly how much that was going to reduce plastic pollution. They do include other important items, though, and they do include things like litter abatement and the collection of plastics that would otherwise end up in rivers and then eventually in the ocean.
Thank you very much. Indeed, you're providing us with a complimentary document, so we'll be very glad to accept that. I have a question now for Mr. Lee. Thank you for being with us, and I'd like to applaud the initiatives you have concerning your involvement in the Circular Economy Lab. So in the study, we observe that just about all the stakeholders are in favor of the circular economy. Everyone who has come to talk to us has said, yes, the circular economy. But in spite of that, collectively, we have a worrisome delay in implementing a circular economy. And indeed, someone from Unilever Canada said that you facilitate a collaborative and cooperative forum. But that's why I'm concerned, actually. You have this forum. On the other hand, it seems as if there's no concrete action being taken. So can you tell us what tangible results come out of the dialogue that you have, and what progress, what sustainable progress has been observed among your partners?
Thank you for the question. I guess I'd start by saying the economy is a pretty big ship, and it takes a long time to turn it. So these things, while they seem to happen very, very slowly, we are making progress in some regards. So we are adding items to our recycling program to get them back into the circular economy. We're adding items to our green bin programs. We're adding new recyclable items. Some folks are looking at mattresses and furnishings to get them back into a circular economy. Some of the policy items that we talked about today, I think would be helpful too. A move to stronger producer responsibility or more producer responsibility. would allow producers to, as Mr. Getz has said, it would allow them to kind of implement programs that are maybe more efficient, more effective, to capture more materials and get them into the circular economy.
Et effectivement, tantôt, je pense.
And in fact, earlier, I think you told us that you have worked on extended producer responsibility. I want to ask a question now of Mr. Getz. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Mr. Getz, first of all, you know that most of the information we have comes from websites and such, but there's an absence of recent content on your website, and it is an important issue, that of the problem of plastic bottles everywhere. And you said that your members made commitments to increase the recycled content in their production of plastic bottles in the coming years. I would like to know how much, what was the degree of that commitment and the timelines, because in your document you said in the coming years. Well, I think you can agree that the coming years can mean quite a long period of time. So I would like to know what is the degree of that commitment and the timelines for it.
Thank you for that. If there's any information missing from our website, we'll be happy to provide that to committee afterwards. We generally rely on audited reports that go in and are approved by provincial governments. Like, for example, in British Columbia or in Quebec, we have to, through our recycling programs, we have to submit a report to the provincial government that is audited first. So it's audited, then it is submitted to the provincial government, and they sign off on those recycling targets. The recycling and collection numbers that we are achieving. But directly to your question, we do have programs in place in almost every province. Two examples I would talk about as far as where we're trying to achieve the even higher targets are Ontario and Quebec. Okay. So in Ontario, we actually advocated in favor of an 80% target for collection, which we hope is going to be included in draft regulation in Ontario.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we'll have to stop there, but you'll have a chance to provide that information in response to other questions. But I have good news, colleagues and witnesses. The Honourable Sonia Savage was able to connect. Welcome, Minister. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. That's wonderful.
I apologize for this. We had they said it's a technical infrastructure problem. Probably our Government of Alberta platform was with firewalls. In any event, I've logged in on an iPhone, good old iPhone. Okay, well
that's great that you're here, and we'll go straight to your opening. We'll have you give your opening comments, the 5-minute opening comments, and then we'll go back to the questioning. Then we have to break for about 10 minutes for a vote, and we'll all come back and finish off the meeting. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, and I'll try to be quick here. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and it's a pleasure to be here on behalf of the Government of Alberta. Our province has a long history of pairing responsible resource development and the development of our natural resources with sound environmental stewardship. And when it comes to the plastics industry, that combination remains our primary focus. And we believe that it's the best long-term solution to the issue of plastic waste. As a government, we recognize the immense danger plastic waste can pose to the environment, not just for Canada, but for the whole world. However, Alberta's position is quite easy to summarize. Plastic itself is not the problem. The problem is waste. And for instance, in 2016, Environment and Climate Change Canada estimated that 86% of our plastics in our country were sent to a landfill. This represents not just an environmental waste, but an economic one as well. That same amount of waste could have been recycled and resold with an estimated value of $7.8 billion. It is that future which we are pursuing in coordination with our partners in industry, academia, and environmental groups. Collectively, we need to capture that lost value and avoid the plastic waste, which can harm our lands, oceans, and waterways. We understand that Alberta has a central role to play in the future of plastics in Canada. And that's because we house the largest petrochemical manufacturing sector in all of Canada. And our goal is to be able to diversify our economy and to grow this industry further in the coming years. And when considering the effects of banning single-use plastics, please know that the decision will undoubtedly impact the future of Alberta's economy and environment. We expect the immediate impact of such a ban on our existing plastics manufacturing sector to be significant. Alberta companies produce a wide variety of plastic products, including many multi-use plastics, and our single-use plastics will remain in demand in international markets. The chemistry industry of Canada estimates that between $100 to $500 million in sales are at risk, representing between 500 and 2,000 jobs. Our longer-term issues with the ban are of greater concern. First, the opaque process by which plastics are being treated under the Canada Environmental Protection Act is troublesome. This approach, we believe, intrudes into provincial jurisdiction and overrides our responsibility to manage waste within our own province. If individual provinces wish to proceed with a ban of materials that they view as harmful, that should remain a provincial responsibility. A federal ban announced through changes to a regulatory schedule is a one-size-fits-all approach that quite simply doesn't fit all needs. As we've seen during the COVID pandemic, plastics of all kinds are often vitally important to daily life. When it comes to management of single-use plastics, provinces and even municipalities are in a better position to decide what should be allowed or banned. More concerning is the long-term signal this sends to our potential partners in building a truly circular economy for plastics. The Chemistry Industry Association of Canada again warns that there are significant risks to the larger plastic supply chain, especially recent producers in Alberta and Ontario. Banning plastics outright instead of working with industry and consumers to establish the kind of advanced recycling techniques and practices needed to push the sector forward, ironically, wastes an enormous opportunity for Canada. Establishing ourselves as leaders in plastic recycling, as Alberta intends to do, will not only take plastic out of landfills and oceans, but will provide much needed jobs across a range of industry. My colleague, the Minister of Environment and Parks, is overseeing the policy initiatives to lead the way in Alberta by bending the curve on plastic use towards a circular economy. We're in the process of introducing extended producer responsibility, EPR, which we believe is the most effective way to deal with plastic waste. EPR accounts for regional differences when implemented at the provincial level, while furthering collective action on reducing waste. Going further and building on an innovative hub of recycling know-how and connecting it with the large-scale petrochemical manufacturing we have available in Alberta gives us a unique opportunity. We are well positioned to become a global destination for green investors while simultaneously enhancing Canada's reputation as a steward for our planet's pristine environment. That's the future that Alberta is trying to build, but such a move will only be possible with the coordinated efforts of industry, researchers, and government. Banning plastics with the opportunity to arbitrarily expand that ban to more items in the future will instead remove the very investor interest we need to build a positive future for plastics in Canada. Here in Alberta, we're aiming to attract $30 billion of new investments in the petrochemical sector over the next decade. And this ban reduces the attractiveness of Canada as an investment opportunity. So in summary, Alberta does not support the plastic ban as planned, not necessarily because of any immediate impacts on our industry or environment, but because it implies a short-term thinking that will be detrimental to the innovation needed to reduce plastic waste.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Minister. So we'll continue with finishing off with our first 6-minute round with Mr. Bachrach for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to all of our witnesses for their testimony today so far. My first question is to Ms. Wallace. We've heard from the plastics industry, and I think we heard some of this in the minister's comments a moment ago, that plastic isn't the problem, waste is. I wonder if you could comment on this perception or perspective on the issue and provide your view on it.
Sure, yeah, thank you for the question. So, for more than half a century, the plastics industry has been touting recycling as the solution to our plastic pollution crisis. And yet globally, only 9% of plastic waste has been recycled. 91% has ended up in the environment. That's 5.7 million tons of billion tons of plastic. So it's a huge amount. Our recycling systems, as Norm was mentioning earlier, Mr. Lee, were never designed to handle the volume or complexity of plastic materials on the market. And so I think it is short-sighted to assume that we could be able to handle this through recycling and that it is really just a waste issue. Frankly, consumers have been told for years that if we just did a better job of putting stuff into the right bin and cleaning things before we put them into the bin, this wouldn't be a problem at all, but it obviously is. And I want to say that I'm particularly concerned about the reoccurring narrative about chemical recycling saving us from all of this, because the vast majority of chemical recycling systems that exist today are not actually turning plastic into new plastic. They are turning plastic into fuel, and that fuel is then burned, which means that plastics are really only a pit stop in a fossil fuel's existence from extraction to tailpipe. So really, I do think the priority here needs to be reducing plastic use overall. And an obvious place to start would be eliminating these unnecessary single-use plastics, including the ones that the government has proposed in its ban.
Picking up where you left off, the topic of the plastics proposed for the ban, what is I don't think anyone likes the idea of products being banned. It seems like a policy of last resort. Why is it such an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to addressing the global plastic pollution problem?
I think there's a few things. I think in general, the way we have looked at this problem in the past has been kind of an end of pipe solution. So we already have a bathtub overflowing with water, let's get a mop, but we're not willing to turn off the tap. And so bans are actually an example of a way that we could help reduce plastic use overall. And that's important because, as I said in my opening remarks, the modeling shows that plastic production is expected to increase significantly by 2040. And if we don't actually really meaningfully reduce that, all of the potential interventions we could put on the table will not be enough to stop the flow of plastic into our oceans. So I do think bans are a critical piece. They also signal that Canadians are unwilling to accept unnecessary single-use plastics. And they really prioritize plastic for the places in our society where they might have real value, for example, like in the medical space.
One of the other issues we've heard a lot of contention from the plastics industry over the course of these hearings is the inclusion of plastic under SEPA's definition of toxic substances. I'm sure you've followed this debate. Why do you feel that it's appropriate? I believe from your introductory remarks, you indicated that it was. Why is it appropriate that plastics be listed under SEPA's definition of toxic?
For sure. So thank you again for the question. I think absolutely plastic manufactured items meet the definition of toxic under SEPA. And I'm not going to read the definition again because I know that Ms. Kieran from the Environmental Law Society or Law Center at the University of Victoria already did that. But I do want to reiterate that SEPA is the federal law that the government has available at its fingertips to regulate plastic production, use, and disposal. And so, we've heard a lot from industry and other folks that have presented to the committee about how this shouldn't just be about bans, it should also be about recycled content requirements, it should be about maybe reuse or refill targets. Those are all things that can also happen under SEPA once this listing is final. And so really, this is a necessary step for the federal government to establish its jurisdiction and take appropriate actions to keep plastic out of the environment.
Thank you. Shifting briefly to Ms. Wersig, we've heard the topic of fossil fuel subsidies already raised. Could you speak to the role that Canada's fossil fuel subsidies play in the plastic pollution problem?
Well, unfortunately, Canada is paying, Canadian public coffers are paying both subsidies for the production of plastics and also for these untested and frankly not environmentally sustainable processes to try to deal with plastics at the end of life, usually through some manner of burning them or thermally treating them and turning them, as Ms. Wallace mentioned, back into fuel. So I think that fossil fuel subsidies are a much bigger problem than for plastics, but plastics should not be forgotten when we're talking about the need to transition away from subsidies and transition away from carbon in general.
Thank you.
Unfortunately,
you would have cut me off there. I was going to try to fit one more in. Thank you, Mr.
We're
Chair.
already over 6 minutes,
okay.
But yeah.
I appreciate
it.
Anyway,
I think we're going to cut everybody off for a few minutes because it's time to vote. So our apologies to the witnesses, but we have to leave the call for at most really 15 minutes. We have to vote with our iPhone voting apps and then come back. So I would ask that everyone just put themselves on mute. I mean, the members, the committee members put themselves on mute, stop the video and vote on their phones. And then apparently we can't start until the voting period is over. So once we have the result of the vote, we can all unmute and turn our cameras back on and it will be seamless if that's okay with everybody. Okay, so I'll just suspend the meeting for about 15 minutes. Thank you. And again, apologies to the witnesses. Can you hear me, Madam Clerk? Everything? Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. So we'll continue. We'll start the second round of questioning. It's a 5-minute round. With I assume all the witnesses are back on as well. So we'll start with Mr. Redekop for 5 minutes. Mr. Redekop.
Sorry, I just got back on. Am I up?
Yeah, for 5 minutes.
I made the mistake of clicking the wrong leave button on Zoom. Thanks to all the panel members for being here today. I wanted to speak with you, Mr. Getz. I think you probably deserve the gold star for the most recycling. We've talked a lot about that today at 75%. I think you said in your in your industry. I was looking on your website, and under the initiative section, you talk about the Canada Plastics Act. And it makes note that your members are part of this pact, the Canada Plastics Pact. It was launched, an industry-led initiative launched in 2018, well before the Liberals decided to come out and declare plastic as toxic. And so in your opening statement, it sounded like you were clearly suggesting to the committee that we stay the course rather than go down a magical Liberal red brick road. But I guess I just want to ask, do you believe that the Liberal government took into account the work that you and your partners have been doing with the Plastics Pact since 2018, prior to their recent announcement that plastics are suddenly toxic?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Many of our members, I will say, not all of them are members of the Canadian Plastic Pact, but it is an initiative that the Canadian Beverage Association is supporting. I think that this is a place where industry, recyclers, processors, and even some environmental groups have come together and said, let's work together collaboratively to try to remove more plastic from the environment, which is what we all want to do. I guess my only concern would be at the federal level is that when it comes to the beverage sector in particular, which I represent, that there's a bit of a lack of an understanding about what goes on in every single province when it comes to beverage container recycling. Again, we have programs in place in every province. Some are EPR, some are run by industry, which is of course what I think almost everyone has said around this table that we need to support. Some are government controlled, which we are not as much in favor of. We want to take responsibility for our containers, but there does need to be collaboration around the fact that these files do lie at the provincial level, and we obviously we appreciate the idea of harmonization on a national level. We would like that. It's hard to work in every province and every territory with a different program. But through maybe perhaps CCME, we really need to take that idea of harmonization to a new level, and simply having the federal government weigh in with new rules that are not coordinated at the provincial level, which where waste and recycling is handled, is problematic.
So if I might ask that a different way, does the government's ban on plastics reflect the desires of your association?
No, it does not. Again, with the plastic that we use in our industry, again, PET, I'm not going to get into the I'm not a scientist, but it is highly recyclable, recycled at high levels. Domestically, it's not shipped overseas. And so we would ask the federal government to be very careful on putting rules in place that are not reflective of what is actually going on in the domestic market and some of the plastic markets here in Canada, fully recognizing that some plastics are much harder to recycle, but to make sure to coordinate with the provinces on this and the programs that are already in place across every region in the country.
So back to your website again, I noticed on that same Plastics Pact page, you referred to a Deloitte study that was undertaken for the Government of Canada based on, that talked about the economic risks and rewards of the approach of the Pact versus the government's outright ban. Are you familiar with that? Can you briefly tell us if there's anything of value for us in that report?
Yeah, I think I guess my comment on that would be, the government at one point is banning certain saying they want to ban certain products, but is also saying they want to increase the circular economy. And I do think, and I'm sure we'll disagree with certain witnesses on this committee, but there is a real value there to try to build that circular economy. And in particular, as jurisdictions, the Europeans, even certain large jurisdictions in the United States, like California, are starting to talk about recycled PET content. And because we do have fairly robust recycling programs here in Canada, that is a real opportunity for us if we are serious about building the circular economy, instead of just banning banning material. There is an economic opportunity there.
Could you provide that Deloitte study to the committee, please?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll follow up on that tomorrow. 100%.
Great. We'll go to Mr. Saini now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to all the witnesses for coming today. Ms. Wallace, I would like to start with you if possible, because we've looked at the environmental impacts, but there's also the human impact, there's also the terrestrial impact, there's also the animal impact. And, you know, when we talk about bioaccumulation, we know that there's long-term effects of bioaccumulation of microplastics in the food chain. And, you know, what the toxic effects of that apply to the sort of the animal world?
Thank you for the question. So I do want to say that, you know, if you really want to get into the deep science, I would recommend, I know Dr. Chelsea Rockman already spoke to the committee, but she really is an expert in terms of all of the current and upcoming science demonstrating the impacts that microplastics have on wildlife and fish and potentially even us. You did bring up a great point with microplastics. So some microplastics are designed as microplastics. So those would be things like microbeads, which the federal government has already banned. But some microplastics actually come from the fragmentation of macroplastics. So larger plastic items, when left to wear in the environment, break into smaller pieces. And then those smaller pieces are easily consumed by wildlife. They're almost impossible to remove from the environment. And those are the kinds of plastics that are showing up inside our bodies. I do want to point out, I know I mentioned in my opening remarks the study that recently found microplastics in human placenta, but there also was a recent study put out pre-published, so it's still pending peer review, but found that microplastics actually impede our respiratory cells' ability to repair themselves, which is terrifying to begin with, but I have to say particularly terrifying in the middle of a respiratory pandemic, when as much as possible we want to make sure that our respiratory systems are fully functional. So I do think this is a new area of science. These two studies I just mentioned have come out in the last 6 months. So they have come out since the government's federal science assessment on plastic pollution. And I'm sure that we are just going to hear more and more of these kinds of stories. And so really, if we are following the precautionary principle, we do need to do everything we can right now to keep these plastics out of the environment and out of our bodies.
So basically what I'm hearing from you is that the microplastics can affect the food chain, which will affect animals on one end, but also by our consumption and non-consumption of microplastics, that could also have a biological effect on our bodies.
Yeah, so microplastics can be either ingested directly. So a fish could ingest microplastics when they're eating something else. We could ingest microplastics by ingesting a fish that has microplastics in its tissue. We could also ingest microplastics directly from the air that we breathe or the water that we drink. So really these microplastics are everywhere. And as I said, there are definitely studies showing that they are having a negative impact on wildlife, including behavioral changes and changes in reproduction. We're just starting to, I think, hit the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the potential impacts on human health.
So I was reading an article in Nature, I think it was in Nature, and there was a study done at the University of Utah last year. And one of the findings they found is they found the nanoparticles in different parts, on different parts of Earth, basically that it was being carried by the air or being aerosolized. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I have read that study as well. So yeah, basically what's happening is the plastics are breaking down into really small pieces. Nanoplastics are smaller than microplastics. And plastics were showing up in wild areas in the United States, for example, far, far away from civilization, suggesting that these plastics were being picked up by the wind and the air and being redistributed. Plastic has literally been found everywhere on the planet, including far Arctic regions, including Mount Everest. And so we know that these plastics are not just being deposited in these locations as part of litter, they are ending up in these areas because they are traveling on ocean currents and wind, etc.
So it's not just an ocean problem then?
No, it is a ubiquitous global environmental problem.
Okay. Any more time, Chair?
You have about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Mr. Lee, very quickly, what would the municipal recycling programs look like under an extended producer responsibility regime?
I can give you the example in Ontario, and I think it could be a good example. The province would set targets for the collection of various materials, and they would, of course, oversee and enforce those. The producers would have the ability to implement that and achieve those targets, generally as they see fit, as long as they meet accessibility targets for all people. Then producers would perhaps they would hire municipalities to provide service to them, or they would hire private sector companies to provide service to them. They would collect, they would communicate with the public, and they would report on their hopefully success.
Parfait, merci. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you.
La parole est à vous.
Ms. Posey, the floor is yours. Yes, well, hello. I don't have much time. Mr. Getz, I would just like you to complete your comments before the break. You said that there was some higher objectives in Ontario, 80%. Simply the number for Quebec, what was it?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and thank you for following up. I really appreciate that because I was cut off a little bit there. I'll be very quick here. Our targets for beverage collection in Quebec is 75% by 2025 and 90% by 2030. Now, we're already hitting about 75%. But the province and working with industry has announced an expansion of the deposit program there in Quebec, which we are currently working with the provincial government on building. And you'll see announcements about that coming out in the very near future, but that program is going to be dramatically expanded.
I'd like to break you off there. I only have 2.5 minutes. Please allow me to point out that your website is only in English, so that's another little complication for us. I would like to ask a question to Ms. Wirsig of Environmental Protection Canada. Ms. Wirsig, you talked a lot about things that really, I think, are important for the fair transition for workers, because 86% of Canadians are in favor of a nationwide ban on single-use plastics. And we heard the Honourable Minister talk about a loss of jobs, but you talked about a fair transition. I'd like to ask you to elaborate on that a little.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. I will answer in English.
After all the research I've done in English. Yeah, I think we've heard a lot in this study about potential job losses, and we've heard some today about the potential job losses related to the bans on single-use plastics. We would argue that there are immensely more job opportunities available with getting away from single-use plastics, getting to the manufacturing of more durable containers, including durable plastic containers, and setting up reuse systems. I believe the witness from Recyc Québec talked about that last week, about the potential of job creation through other kinds of programs that are key to a green economy, and that are also provide, if I could say, safe and toxic-free jobs to Canadians.
Parfait, merci.
Fine, thank you. We'll move on to Mr. Bachrach now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, we've heard from the industry about the promise of chemical recycling. And I wonder if you could share your perspective on the potential of chemical recycling from a municipal view, and what you see any of the challenges being.
We have, and thank you for the question, we have been tracking chemical recycling and other advanced recycling technologies over the past couple of years, and they do hold some promise or some potential. But in practice, they're still not there. We have worked with some other municipalities on some pilots to recycle plastics in these new advanced technologies, and they're still very sensitive to any contamination in the plastic stream. They're sensitive to any changes in moisture content. So it's going to take some work to get them to the point where they can be developed at scale to tackle this problem. our experience in Alberta has a very large chemical facility in Edmonton. They tend to begin producing either ethanol or methanol type products, or as some of the witnesses have said, some fuel products to get their chemical reactions going well. And scientifically, I'm told they can eventually switch over to producing new plastic polymers that could be used, but that has to be proven still.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that one of the challenges for municipalities and local governments is the lack of consistency in recycling standards from community to community. We heard earlier some concerns about a one-size-fits-all approach. Are there times when a consistent approach federally makes sense and would maximize our waste diversion and recycling rates?
Briefly, please.
Yeah. Yes. I think it would certainly. Provincially, it would help, and federally as well, especially for producers and for organizations, the members that Mr. Getz represents, because they need scale to achieve some of their objectives and to pay for the investments that they would have to make.
Yeah, we'll have to stop there and go. I believe the next questioner is Mr. Generou. Am I correct?
You believe correct.
Okay, go ahead for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to pose a number of my questions to Minister Savage, and based on a lot of, I guess, going back to some of her testimony that she gave just a while back, I would tend to think that based on some of that testimony that the government of Alberta wasn't necessarily consulted on this ban. However, if you were consulted, what were the recommendations of the government provided to the federal government, from the provincial government to the federal government? Were they followed?
Well, thank you for the question. And I hope the technology is working now. And I think if you could nod, Mr. Generou. Okay, yes. Perfect. So I guess just to start with, we're concerned with the overreach, the overextension of the federal government's reach into provincial jurisdiction, which is in the area of waste management, by designating plastics as a toxic substance. So it really goes right into the heart of what is provincial jurisdiction. And the recently introduced, the Bill C-28, the changes in that doesn't change the position that the provinces have. And I think this position is shared by a number of other provinces. My colleague, Minister Nixon, our environment minister, has signed a joint letter with his colleagues from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec addressing some of those concerns. And I guess fundamentally, provinces are the main jurisdiction, the main actors in any sort of plastics product management. It's within provincial jurisdiction, and each of our provinces is taking action to reduce plastic waste. We all are taking this seriously and taking steps to reduce the waste. And so we don't want to see the federal government duplicating outcomes of provincial programs. We do want to continue working with the federal government, but the current proposed approach to plastic products interferes with the outcomes in our programs here in our provinces.
Right. So you kind of answered my second question, which I was going to tie into some of Minister Nixon's letter with his colleagues. But if we could talk just about what you hit on in your testimony about the federal announcement on plastics was made, from my recollection, the day after Alberta announced their plan to grow the economy by becoming a recycling hub. Can you tell us again on how the government's plastic ban proposal would affect the Alberta economy, in particular, how it will impact jobs that could be lost in the province?
Well, I guess there's two areas there really where it would impact, and it's both with our petrochemical sector and with our goal to become a global center for a plastic circular economy, and it impacts both both areas in it. And both of those areas are key factors in our natural gas strategy, which is part of our diversification strategy in Alberta and our efforts for economic recovery post-pandemic. So it really does strike at what we're trying to do in Alberta to diversify and to recover. And so from the petrochemical perspective alone, I mentioned in my opening remarks that this is a $30 billion potential industry by 2030. We know that the global demand for petrochemicals is growing, and companies are looking to invest. They have billions of dollars to invest, and we believe that this could drive investment away from Canada into other jurisdictions. Companies will look for jurisdictions that are the most competitive, that are not hostile to the business that the company's trying to do. So we'd be concerned that it'll drive that investment to jurisdictions that don't have the same high standards that we have here in both reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it'll drive it to jurisdictions that aren't trying to establish a circular economy. So we see that as being really, really concerning. Really concerning to what we're trying to do to diversify our economy and attract investment. And the same goes with our efforts to set up a circular economy and become a North American center of excellence. There's a huge opportunity there as well to reuse and the plastic waste.
Thank you. We're pretty much out of time, Mr. General.
Can I sneak one last one in, Chair?
You can sneak a comment.
Okay. I'll just a yes or no question then, Chair, if that's fine with you.
Okay,
would you agree?
Yes or no? Yeah.
Yes or no?
I hate to tell the minister from Alberta that she has to limit herself to yes or no, but anyway, go ahead.
Right. Okay. I'll do my best here. Would you agree that the label of toxic under SEPA is unnecessary?
It's absolutely unnecessary.
That sounds like a no to me. Okay, so right. We'll go to Mr. Biddle now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And since Mr. Genereux brought in the subject of toxic substances, I'll speak about another toxic substance. Minister Savage, and this isn't a trick question because I enjoy the products myself. Have you ever had a soft drink or a beer?
Have I ever had a soft drink or a beer?
Yes.
Yes.
And in that product, and again, a product that I enjoy, and my doctor would probably tell me to drink less of both, there's a toxic product under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act called carbon dioxide. And it's toxic. And I looked that you're a member from the Calgary area, and I noticed that there are a lot of breweries in the Calgary area. And has the toxic designation of carbon dioxide impacted the beverage industry in Alberta? It hasn't seemed to in Ontario, but I'm curious if it's impacted the beverage industry in Alberta.
I think you'd probably have to ask the beverage industry that question.
Well, as a member for Calgary, I notice I'm looking at the Calgary beer map, and I see dozens of breweries that have popped up in the Calgary area. And despite this being a toxic substance within a beverage that we consume, isn't it fair to say that consumers know that carbon dioxide in a beer or a soft drink is safe? Rather than if I filled this room up with carbon dioxide, it's toxic. And isn't that the same with plastic? I appreciate the talking points. I'm a politician myself. But isn't it fair that within the definition of the Environmental Protection Act, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act, that plastic is a toxic substance similar to carbon dioxide, but that consumers are smart enough and industry is smart enough to know the difference?
I think you're comparing apples and oranges here, and your analogy completely fails. What we're dealing with here is trying to attract international investment into a sector where those companies can invest anywhere in the world. So the reputational harm that they look at as labeling plastics as toxic, those companies can invest anywhere on the planet. So I think you're trying to compare apples and oranges. So what we're dealing with here is international investment that can pick and choose jurisdictions to invest in. And what we're going to do and what we're going to see is that investment going to other places in the world, and not in Canada, certainly not in Alberta, and certainly not in Alberta, where we're trying to diversify our economy and attract new investment outside of oil and gas. And we're able to do that in a way that is at a low carbon footprint and at the highest environmental standards. So that investment is going to go somewhere else. So it's an entirely different analogy than beer and soft drinks and consumer choice.
I appreciate that, Minister. And if I can go to Ms. Wallace and Ms. Wurzig. Am I comparing apples to oranges? I was wondering if you can respond to the minister, because we've heard these talking points from the plastics industry a lot. Are consumers and sophisticated industry, from your standpoint, able to deal with this designation? It seems that they're suggesting in the plastics industry that we're not smart enough to understand, even though we drink products, we consume products, and have products in our home that are labeled toxic.
I'll jump in first, if that's okay. So yes, thank you for the question. I agree that I think Canadians are smart enough to be able to understand this nuance. I also think that industry is smart enough to be able to understand this nuance. Industry has told us about the huge innovative capacity that they have. We also know, as I mentioned earlier, that rules like this are coming down the pipe in numerous jurisdictions around the world. So this isn't going to be Canada as a lone actor, and every other place in the world is super excited to increase plastic production and use. Plastic is on its way out, and Canada really needs to get in front of a circular economy that is focused on really using plastic when absolutely necessary and otherwise transitioning to other materials.
Ms. Wurzig, if you'd...
Yeah, I think you won't be surprising or shocking or scaring any Canadian when you tell them that plastic is toxic to the environment. They've been telling us that, they've been telling pollsters that, they've been telling politicians that. It is the most evident thing that we can say about plastic right now, is that plastic pollution is toxic to the environment. So this is not something that will surprise anybody, and it shouldn't. I mean, the toxic label under CEPA is a legal question. It's not going to be labeled on any materials unless the federal government ever chose to do that, which we don't believe is in the plan. It's a necessary step to make the regulations that Canadians are asking for. And it is perhaps a signal to investors. And hopefully, as we've mentioned before, the green transition will also be a signal to investors to have clean, carbon-free production and manufacturing in Canada.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to the third round. I had Mr. Albas, but he switched with Mr. Genereux. So I don't know if it's Mr. Genereux or Mr. Albas. Is it? Maybe you could inform me.
MP Genereux, did you want another round, or did you want to share this one?
No, go ahead. Yeah, we can share it, Dan, but you start.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll start and I'll pass it over. Yeah. So I'd like to just go back to the minister. Minister, you know, you were presented here with an apple oranges kind of, you know, presentation by MP Biddle. What I'm hearing from industry is the fact that the term plastic, manufactured plastic, could refer to any type of plastic that shares the same qualities. And under CEPA, by being designated under Schedule 1 as toxic, it's not only the negativity to the consumer, but in fact that there is no certainty, there is no scientific basis that if an application being used for a single-use medical single-use form of plastic, let's say a syringe, to give a vaccination, it has the same molecules as some of the products that the government is banning. So from a business perspective, investors would say, if I don't know what is going to be regulated and under what circumstances, because the science, you can't tell the difference between the two, that sends a chill on investment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we've certainly heard from investors. Of course, we're trying to attract $30 billion of investment to Alberta, and we have a lot of economic and competitive advantages with a skilled workforce, with an industry that's committed to carbon reduction. But we've heard from investors that there is a great cloud of uncertainty in Canada over over what this means. And that's piled on top of a lot of other uncertainty that's out there. Remember, we're still dealing with Bill C-69 that gives us regulatory uncertainty on even getting a project through a regulatory process. Add on this piece of legislation and the labeling of plastic as toxic, that adds on a whole new layer of uncertainty. And again, those investors have choices of where to invest in other jurisdictions. In fact, we've seen a huge investment of a petrochemical facility going into Pennsylvania. That facility would have been nice to have in Canada because that was jobs. For Alberta, this opportunity, to give you some perspective, the opportunity for Alberta for jobs is we believe it could create 90,000 direct and indirect jobs over construction and operation. And those are 90,000 jobs that Alberta desperately needs. It's 90,000 jobs that Canada desperately needs. And it's 90,000 jobs that could go to some other jurisdiction with lower environmental standards. So this is, I would agree with what you just said, and it's a very significant concern for our province.
In the last meeting, we had Professor Curran, who actually said that by designating this into SEPA, it allows the government to regulate, and regulation can take many forms, including bans, such as we've seen from this government. Other witnesses today have said that there could be other forms of regulation once this gets put in. That kind of regulatory uncertainty, especially considering you've said that primarily provinces have been the ones to regulate in this and know exactly the challenges by both industry and by reusers, processors of plastics, and the municipalities. Do you feel that this could put not just an investment chill, but it could lead to who's on first with dealing with plastics?
Well, I would agree with that too, because we're trying to, as I said earlier, we're trying to start a plastic circular economy, and we see a tremendous opportunity there as well. And this is going to create uncertainty with being able to achieve our goals with that too. And for instance, we know that the global demand for these types of recoverable waste materials has been reduced, and there's fewer countries accepting waste. North America has that problem. We believe we can be a center of excellence here in the province of Alberta. Again, much needed jobs and much needed diversification. And this whole piece of legislation and uncertainty puts a cloud on whether we can achieve that type of circular economy and create the feedstock, plastic feedstock, to start a circular economy and to achieve our objectives there. So it does create a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And that's why I think we've seen 5 provinces jointly sign a letter reminding the federal government that this is provincial jurisdiction, and reminding that the provinces are acting. It's not a failure of provinces to act. You've got at least 5 provinces that are taking initiative. So
I'd like to apologize to Mr. Genereux because I've been Mr. Ungenerous because I didn't say it many times.
Let's blame the chair.
Mr. Baker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here. I would honestly love to ask all of you questions, and of course I won't have time to do that. And specifically, Mr. Getz, we worked together well in the past on other issues, and I hope you won't hold it against me if I direct my questions elsewhere. And Mr. Lee, I'm not a University of Guelph alum, and I hope you won't hold that against me. I'll try not to hold it against you. But I will direct my questions to you, Mr. Lee. There are a number of insights that I drew from your presentation. I took away that we can take many steps regulating and modifying the materials we use in packaging, but we do little to help the environment if we don't do a few things. One is if we don't create standards that must be adhered to regarding what can be recycled and what can be composted. If we don't communicate clearly in a consistent fashion what can be recycled and composted and what can't. That's both so that consumers can make the right choices when purchases and trying to recycle or compost, and so that processing facilities like the ones that you run can actually sort and process recyclable and compostable materials effectively. And also, if we don't equip our processing facilities, whether that's recycling or composting, to be able to manage that waste appropriately. Those are some of the key takeaways I took from your presentation. Is that correct? Are these the key points I should take away?
Yes, absolutely. It is. whatever the government implements as far as legislation and regulations has to be implemented in practice, and it becomes very practical. People need to be able to understand what to do and what bin to put different packages and products into. And of course, we need to be able to upgrade our facilities and invest in them. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you for that. Could you tell us what are the consequences of compostable materials entering your processing facilities? And I guess I'm asking first, this two-part question. What are the consequences for compostable materials entering your processing facilities for municipal recycling systems like the ones that you run, but also for the environment?
Well, if and these are sort of compostable plastic products and alternatives like that, if they end up in our blue box recycling facility, they'll end up as contamination probably in a lot of other streams. Sorting is never perfect in these streams, and if you, for example, combine compostable plastic bags with fossil fuel plastic bags, they're just no longer recyclable. There's enough of them in there. Same thing if you put these compostable products and packages into our composting system, and if they don't fully break down, then they contaminate the finished compost and make it unsellable. For the environment, most of these products coming into our system now, as our facilities are designed, would end up pulled out as residue and sent to landfill. So they would not be diverted without additional investments in our facilities.
Right, which is harmful to the environment, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
You proposed a number of solutions to the problem, and I realize I have under 2 minutes left, so I'll ask for your responses to be concise if you can, Mr. Lee. You proposed a number of solutions. One of those is producer responsibility for compostable products. What should those responsibilities include?
The same as any other producer responsibility program. They should be responsible for operating and funding the program to meet high targets.
Okay. And another one that you recommended is mandatory recycled content requirements. What do you think should be included in those requirements?
I think that's going to drive demand for the recycled commodities that we collect and produce. One of the things is there should be a minimum post-consumer amount in there to make sure that the materials consumers put in the blue box get recycled back into products.
Okay. And another one that you recommended is federal programs to support investment in processing infrastructure for compostable products and packaging. Can you describe how you'd recommend those programs be designed or what they should look like?
There's a couple of options from a municipal perspective. We're quite familiar with the stimulus type funding where the federal, provincial, and municipal governments all contribute. So we'd be in favor of those as long as all three parties agree. There's also kind of direct grants, perhaps as part of a climate change plan. We've taken advantage of some of those in the past, so those work for us. My understanding on the private side for those service providers to make investments, they're pretty receptive to some tax programs that incentivize investments.
Merci. Alors, on est à bout de temps.
We're out of time. Ms. Posey, you have 2.5 minutes, please. Ms. Posey, you're on mute. All right. I don't want that to count in my time, but the interpreter was saying that Mr. Lee had a problem with his microphone. Yes, I noticed the same thing. Mr. Lee, if you could raise your microphone boom a little. Go ahead, Ms. Posey. Thank you. My question is for the Honorable Minister of Energy. Listen, you mentioned that other countries have standards that are less strict. However, Ms. Wallace from Oceania was telling us that the European Union and a number of other countries have more and more strict measures. So should we compare to certain countries in Africa or China or others? So it seems to me the comparison is a little bit awkward. So you said that it was a provincial jurisdiction, and I agree with you on that. But Mr. Getz said that there are stricter objectives in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba, higher objectives. So the question goes along the following lines. All the other provinces, should they have higher objectives? Whereas it seems that Alberta wants to head towards the standards that are less or that are the lowest or weakest in other countries. There's Alberta Plastics Recycling Association, which says that in Alberta, manufacturers are not required to contribute financially to recovery. There's a Recycling Council of Alberta that says Alberta will continue to be the biggest producer of this kind of waste per capita in the country if nothing changes. So I'd like to hear you on the possibility of that perhaps changing. And you talked about working with the industry, but also working with those other organizations that I just named.
Minister?
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here, and I think it's because I'm on a phone and it's trying to for the translation feed. I'm sorry. Am I still on?
No, we can hear you, but did you hear the translation?
I did not. I didn't hear a thing in either language, so I missed. Like I couldn't. I think it's because I'm on a telephone.
What about now? Est-ce que vous me comprenez maintenant? Si je parle, vous me comprenez?
Do you hear me now? If I'm speaking in French, can you hear the English?
Did you hear me in English when I spoke French?
No, I can't. That's not working at all. I apologize. I think it's because I'm on a telephone.
It's not obviously not your fault. Excusez, Madame.
Sorry, Ms. Posey. Try again, perhaps, but you could ask a question of someone else because Ms. Savage is unable to hear the interpreter.
Suggestion, perhaps the translator who translated into English simultaneously with Monique could just pose the question in English to the minister.
That's not a bad idea. That's a good idea. Is that possible?
Thank you. Yes, that works with me.
Okay, can I don't know how we do that technically. Does the interpreter just cut in, or how does that work?
The question had to do with the. Okay, I don't know if the Honourable Minister can hear the interpreter now, but the question had to do with the fact that in Alberta they seem to be aiming at lower targets or objectives than in the rest of the country. And can you explain if Alberta can collaborate with some of the associations which aim toward higher targets, and if you compare it to different countries such as the European Union?
I still can't hear anything.
Okay, I mean, somehow it's not working. So. Madame Posey, est-ce que vous pourriez...
Ms. Posey, could you please, you won't lose that time, but could you please ask a question of another witness? Well, perhaps I'll ask one last question to Ms. Wissid concerning the comparison between countries that have less regulation. Ms. Wissid, whether Canada should take into account countries that have lower regulations or weaker regulations. In Canada, we have Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec that are making additional efforts. And to my viewpoint, it seems to me that all the provinces ought to make additional efforts based on a country that has regulations.
Yeah, I think it's I mean, I'm not sure that Canada can really boast of having better environmental protections than many countries out there. We've not been a leader on climate change. We're not a leader on plastics. The Alberta government has just handed more than $400 million to a virgin plastics producer that will make polypropylene out of propane. And I'm not sure why we consider that to be an environmentally friendly economic development project. So what I would suggest, I mean, if we can regulate proper reuse and recycling of plastics, that plant could contribute to durable plastic products that could be used for reuse systems. But unless we have a regulatory framework that currently doesn't exist in Alberta or Ontario or Quebec, to be frank, that won't happen. We will just be producing virgin polypropylene that will end up in the world's oceans. It will end up in our landfills. It will be burnt in the Edmonton Enerchem facility, and we will end up breathing in dioxins and furans that are created through the burning of plastic. So I think it's it will only help. We can only live up to environmental standards if we create those standards. And that's why we applaud what the federal government is doing, is trying to create some standards around plastics in Canada.
Merci.
Thank you.
Supply the question from Madame Posey in writing to the minister. I think it was a really good question, and it would be great to get a written response.
We could do that, sure. Can the clerk work with Madame Posey and to craft the question, and then the minister can respond in writing?
Yes, that works with me.
Oui, bien sûr.
Parfait. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Aussi, ça...
Yes, for me too. That would be fine. A good idea.
Si on peut aller poursuivre.
So if we can continue along with Mr. Bachrach for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Ms. Wersig. We've heard a lot of talk about the circular economy. My understanding is that if we move successfully to a circular economy, there's going to be significantly less demand for virgin resin that is used to make plastic. That has implications for employment. Could you offer your thoughts on the role the federal government should play in ensuring a just transition for workers currently involved in that industry?
Yes, thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. The federal government needs to ensure that Canada's economy will be up to supporting workers in the green transition. And so what that means concretely, and Environmental Defence has worked with economist Jim Stanford on a report that I'm happy to share with the committee on some of the, it's actually not a very complicated transition because so many jobs are created in Canada all the time. The service industry creates lots of jobs. What we're talking about with reuse systems is creating lots of jobs through reuse, repair systems, and those kinds of things. And so the circular economy will create jobs, but we need to transition workers from what stands to be a stranded economy involved in the carbon economy, right? We will risk stranding workers and stranding huge amounts of infrastructure and capital in that industry. This is what investment analysts are warning investors about right now. And so what we need to do is build the transition, ensure that older workers have an opportunity to retire with dignity, ensure younger workers get the training they need to shift industries if necessary, and put all that wonderful know-how, the Alberta know-how to work, the technology, the logistics, the engineering, the maintenance, all of those things to work in industries that build our economy for the green future. And we need to put workers first in that, and I would say shareholders second in that priority list.
I have time for a 15-second comment, Mr.
Great question. I actually have a question for Mr. Gates.
Really, really quick, please. Yeah.
Do any of your members currently engage in providing reusable beverage containers?
Very quick answer, please.
We are engaged in our packaging is Tetra Pak, aluminum, and PET, recycled at very, very high levels.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. McLeod for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. And Chair, just to make sure I don't erode into Mr. Genereux's time, I do want to share, but at 2.5 minutes, if you could cut me off, that'll save me what happened with Mr. Albus. I'm going to start with Minister Savage, and she talked about both sides of the equation, both the petrochemical and the opportunity to become world leaders in the circular economy. I'm just trying to remember, but do I not recall that you have some significant First Nations partnerships in, these jobs and opportunities?
We're working we set up a Crown Corporation called AIOC, Alberta Indigenous Opportunity Corporation, and in every major project, we're encouraging Indigenous ownership and Indigenous equity, whether it's a natural resource project or in the petrochemical industry. And we are encouraging, in fact, we just recently announced participation in a natural gas processing facility, Cascade, in which there was significant Indigenous equity, which would apply for, they would be eligible for the petrochemical sector and in the plastic circular economy to be participants, to be owners, to be equity owners.
Great. And so certainly we know as we strive to create equal economic opportunity, I think Alberta is leaps and bounds ahead in that area. My next question is, what I worry about is this banning and the extension of perhaps bans international exports. Have you got any quick comments in terms of how you might worry about what happens to products that are made that are perfectly legal, for example, in the US, that might, by Canada moving in this direction, might create some problems for your industries?
As Mr. General's advocate, I must tell you, you have 25 seconds.
Okay, I'll be very quick. Yes, we would have concerns because I think that would drive investment of petrochemical facilities and other facilities into other jurisdictions just because of the uncertainty. So the manufacturing would still happen, but just not in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. General.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With friends like you, I don't know. Quickly want to get to a question to the Beverage Association. But before I do, just want to, it blows my mind with some of the comments that were made by, what was it, the Environmental Defence Canada about they want to support the workers, and they've heard all the work that Alberta is doing to transition workers, and yet they support this plastic ban. Again, just want to get that comment on the record. But to the Canadian Beverage Association and Mr. Getz, thank you so much for joining us here today. Talking a little bit about the circular economy, if we can, and how beverage recycling relates to that, and maybe even what's needed to increase beverage recycling rates in order to get us to that. If you could kind of expand that argument for us, that would be great.
Thank you for that comment. I just want to go back to a comment that was made earlier by the honourable member from Quebec. I did leave Alberta out of the comments before about recycling rates, but actually Alberta has, when it comes to beverage containers, the highest, I believe, one of, if not the highest recycling rates, collection and recycling rates in Canada. That's just a fact, and it's backed up by the provincial government. To the point of the question on the circular economy, I know, for example, I do live in downtown Toronto. I do know that there are recycling companies that are on the very edge of Toronto that want to collect and buy from the city of Toronto every piece of PET plastic they can possibly buy in order to produce it, recycle it, and sell it into the Canadian and North American market. So this is a real opportunity, especially, quite frankly, as governments move towards recycled PET content and recycled plastic content in materials. So this is an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for Canada. We're actually, I would say, we are way ahead of the United States on this, on the processing, on the marketing, and what we're collecting. And I think we need to really harness that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was the only question I have. I'll cede back my time. Thank you.
Did you cede it to me? Just checking.
Yes, directly to.
I think he wanted to cede it to me because then I could apologize once again for being so uncharitable and irresponsible and taking up so much.
I don't think there's any time left now, Mr. Chair. I think you're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. We're going to Ms. Sachs now. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Abbas, while you are ceding time and being apologetic, thank you for making sure I have mine as well. So we've talked a lot about costs. We've talked about cost to industry. We've talked about cost of jobs. We've talked about the minister herself referenced a potential loss of $500 million in sales by potential uncertainties of labeling plastic as toxic. But I'd like to direct this to Ms. Wallace and Ms. Worsig. What's the economic cost if we don't do this?
So I think actually, according to the federal government's own assessment, that there's $9 billion worth of plastic pollution or plastic littered or plastic in landfill every year, which means that is plastic that we are creating, using once most of the time, and then disposing of. So there's a huge opportunity if we can do a better job of either reusing those plastic materials or actually effectively recycling them in a closed loop system. And then there's also the costs, which are hard to articulate right now in terms of the financial costs to our healthcare system, should these plastics prove to actually be harmful to our health, as we know that we are ingesting them. And also the impacts on our fisheries and our oceans as we continue to inundate these ecosystems with plastic trash.
So the costs of $500 million in sales versus $9 billion in economic costs in addition to health costs. I think the math's pretty clear. Ms. Horsig, did you want to add to that?
And maybe Mr. Lee would be better positioned to speak to this, but I can tell you that in Ontario, municipalities alone spend $150 million on the Blue Box program. And that is to try to, deal with recycling of materials, including plastics that, as he pointed out, often contaminate other waste streams, including both the recycling stream and the composting stream. So right now, without acting, without doing the kinds of things he's suggesting with better definitions, without putting in producer responsibility, without banning those difficult to recycle items, basically, we're going to see rising costs to municipalities to deal with the mess and rising costs of pollution.
Okay, there's one more cost that I'd like to kind of wrap my head around, if we can, and perhaps Mr. Lee can best answer this. What's the cost of landfilling single-use plastics?
Right now, our cost of landfilling in Peel Region is about $70 per ton, 70, and that's maybe on the low end, but typical for landfilling costs in Ontario.
And how much landfill costs are you just even in your own region dealing with on a per annual basis?
We right now we send about half of our waste to landfill, so about 250,000 tons. I'm not good at math, but if you multiply that by $70, that gives you ballpark.
Okay,
it's a big number.
Yeah, I'm sure we can square that out a little bit later. Thank you for that. Chair, how much time do I have?
You have about a minute and a half.
Great. So question to Ms. Wallace again, if I can shift back to you. We talked about plastics being unfavorable and toxic and not good for us on many, many levels of the food chain and our health. What substitutes would be most favorable?
I think as much as possible, we want to be moving away from single use altogether. So I am not super keen to give another recommendation for a single use product for some of the reasons that Mr. Lee brought up. Switching to supposed compostable materials presents new challenges to our waste systems. I think really what we want to do here is as much as possible transition to reusable containers, especially when it comes to packaging and single-use products.
Okay, one last question to interject on my time. And so I grocery shop, I'm a mom. It gives me anxiety. Ms. Worsik mentioned that. I am one of those people. In addition to the 6 items that we have on the list, is there anything else you would potentially like to add for the record that we should be considering?
Oh my goodness, so many things. But I'm also a mom who gets very anxious when I go grocery shopping with all the plastic. But I will actually say that my top items would be single-use coffee cups and lids, because we know those are challenging to recycle and they are consistently found in the environment. I would like government to do a full assessment of cigarette butts and alternatives to them, because we know that they are also one of the most commonly found littered items in the environment, and they are contaminated with toxic chemicals from cigarette smoke. And also all forms of polystyrene, because it fragments into small pieces and ends up all the places it isn't supposed to end up. So I would love to see a ban on that.
Great. Well, that's
perfect.
That's it for our meeting today. I'd like to thank the witnesses for their insights and answers to the excellent questions from all the members. We have one more meeting left in this study. And on Monday, we will be having a steering committee meeting to try and regroup and set a direction for the next few weeks, because there's a lot coming at us. Thank you to the clerk and the analysts and the support staff in the House of Commons. I don't think I've forgotten anyone to thank, but it was a great meeting. We've had some really good meetings as part of this study. Again, thank you to the witnesses. Minister Savage, nice to have you with us today. And we'll all see each other soon enough. And I will now, got to find my gavel I found it. The meeting is now adjourned.
Donnie, I just wanted to